They tell you that money can't buy happiness. That's a lie, a convenient little bedtime story told by people who've always had it. Money buys silence. It buys insulation. It buys the luxury of not having to remember. That's all I've ever wanted. Not the flashy cars, not the Patek Philippe watches that other guys in my line of work bleed for, but the quiet. The kind of wealth that hums. A low, steady dividend of forgetting. My name is Edmond. I'm 32, and my entire life is contained within the 4 glass walls of my apartment on the 57th floor and the stock exchange terminal that glows on my desk 18 hours a day. I'm a numbers guy. I translate the messy, unpredictable chaos of the world into patterns, into opportunities. I find the flaws, the momentary lapses in the market's cold logic, and I strike. It's a clean, sterile kind of violence. My ambition is the only thing I have that feels truly mine. It's a frantic, desperate hunger that wakes me up at 4 a.m. and keeps my fingers glued to the keyboard long after the city outside has gone dark. I'm good at my job because I have to be. For me, there was never a safety net, never a trust fund to fall back on. There was only the long, dizzying drop back to where I started. You see, I remember what it's like to have nothing. I mean, really nothing. Poverty isn't just an empty bank account. It's a physical state of being. It's a constant, grinding humiliation that seeps into your bones. It's the shame of worn-out shoes with soles that are just a little too thin, feeling every crack in the gleaming marble hallway of your school. It's the hot-faced panic when the cashier sighs with theatrical impatience because your mom is paying for groceries with a crumpled fistful of carefully counted change. It's the way the world looks right through you, like you're a ghost haunting the edges of other people's comfortable, brightly lit lives. That's the trauma, you know? It's not one single event you can point to. It's the chronic, dull ache of being made to feel small and insignificant day after day. My entire life, this whole climb up 57 floors of steel and glass has been a desperate, clawing attempt to outrun the ghost of that powerless kid. I didn't just want to be successful, I wanted to become so wealthy, so untouchable, that no one could ever make me feel that way again. I wanted to erase him. But the climb is slow and I'm not a patient man. The ghost is always there, right at my heels. The breaking point wasn't a market crash or a catastrophic loss. It was small, petty, and deeply humiliating. A merger I had spent 6 brutal months structuring, a deal that was supposed to be my masterpiece, was snatched away at the last second. Not by a competitor, but by the smirking son of a board member, a kid named Brandon, who had the right last name and none of the scars. He killed the deal and repurposed my research for his own vanity project. And in the sterile quiet of the boardroom, everyone just nodded along. They looked at me with that familiar, dismissive pity. The ghost of the kid with the worn-out shoes was standing right there beside me, and for the first time in years, I felt him as solid as flesh and bone. I walked out of that building without a word, the sound of their polite, meaningless apologies chasing me down the hall. I just walked, the city lights blurring into a meaningless smear. I was drowning, and the 57th floor felt a million miles away.
That's when I saw the bar. It was tucked between a new, sterile high-rise and a derelict brownstone, a place that had no right to exist in the hyper-modern geometry of downtown. It was called The Last Drop. The sign was a simple, tarnished brass plate, the door a heavy slab of dark, unpolished wood that looked like it had been there for centuries. I'd walked this street 1,000 times on my way to the office and never seen it. It felt like it had been waiting for me, a trap laid in the very architecture of the city. Pulled by an instinct I didn't understand, a moth-to-flame kind of compulsion, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was cool and still, smelling of old wood, leather, and expensive whiskey. It was quiet, timeless. No screens, no thumping music, just the low murmur of a few hushed conversations and the clink of ice in heavy glasses. And she was there, sitting at the far end of the bar as if she owned the place, a throne in the dim light. She wasn't just beautiful, that word is too small, too common. She was inevitable. Dressed in a simple black dress that seemed to absorb the light around her. Her presence filled the room. When she turned to look at me, the casual conversations around us just seemed to stop. Her smile was a work of art, but her eyes were the things that held me. They were dark and ancient, and they weren't reflecting the light of the bar. They were reflecting me. All of my clawing ambition, all of my gnawing fear, all of my grinding, desperate need. She saw it all, laid bare. "A hard day, Edmond?" she asked, her voice a low, melodic hum that vibrated in my chest. She knew my name. I should have turned and run. Instead, I walked toward her and sat down on the stool next to hers. She didn't offer a deal. She just listened. For an hour, maybe more. I spilled everything. The deal, Brandon's smirking face, the boardroom, the shame, the ghost of the poor kid I could never escape. She listened with a profound, unnerving empathy that made me feel more seen than I had ever felt in my life. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. Only when I was an empty, vulnerable wreck did she lean closer, her scent like old books and winter air. "What if you could ensure that never happened again?" she whispered, her voice wrapping around the rawest parts of my insecurity. A taste, a guarantee. She held out her hand, palm up. On her pale skin rested a small, ornate silver pin, like one used for a cravat. "Just a small investment to start," she said, her eyes locked on mine. 10%. A single drop of blood to seal the contract. The room felt cold. The word soul hung unspoken in the air between us, thick and heavy. But all I could see was Brandon's face. All I could feel was the burning shame of that boardroom. I took the pin. The prick on my thumb was a tiny, sharp pain, and the single drop of blood that welled up was impossibly dark against her pale skin. She simply closed her hand over it and smiled, that hungry, knowing smile again. "The dividend will be paid tomorrow." I woke up in my own bed, the morning sun screaming through the glass walls of my apartment. My head throbbed. My thumb was fine. There was no mark, no cut, nothing. It had to be a dream, a stress-induced hallucination brought on by the worst day of my professional life. I laughed at myself, a harsh, hollow sound in the silent apartment. A supernatural bar? A deal for a drop of blood? I was losing my mind. Then I turned on my terminal. There was an urgent message from the senior partner, timestamp 3:17 a.m. The board had held an emergency vote overnight. Brandon's vanity project was dead, deemed fiscally reckless and strategically unsound. My original merger was back on the table, fast-tracked for immediate approval. My name was being credited for demonstrating foresight and saving the company from a catastrophic error in judgment. It was impossible. It was a miracle. It was terrifying. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, my success feeling like an intoxicating poison. Every congratulatory email, every respectful nod in the hallway felt both earned and stolen. The deal was done by noon, and the profits were astronomical. That evening I walked for hours, my mind racing, trying to find
the last drop. It was gone. The space between the new high-rise and the derelict brownstone was just a brick wall, covered with years of grime and faded graffiti. There was no door, no brass plate, no sign that it had ever been there. But I knew. The denial was a thin, brittle shield against a horrifying truth. The success was real. And so was she. The quiet I had bought wasn't the peace I had imagined. It was the silence of a part of myself that was now gone forever. And as I stood there, staring at that brick wall, a new, terrifying thought surfaced, colder and sharper than any fear I had ever known. 10% wasn't enough. The next deals were easier. After a year of unprecedented success, I wanted a promotion to vice president, a position that should have taken me another 5 years to reach. After a week of frustration, of seeing a less qualified colleague getting the inside track, the last drop appeared on my walk home. She was waiting. 20%. I didn't even hesitate. The next day, my rival was out, transferred to the London office after a sudden family emergency. The job was mine. With the promotion came a colder, sharper focus. I remember getting a call from an old friend from college, someone I used to talk with for hours. He was telling me about his new baby, his voice thick with emotion. I found myself checking market futures on my second monitor, waiting for him to finish. The story of his life, nothing more than an inefficient use of my time. A few years after that, I wanted a partnership. It appeared again, this time on our rainy Tuesday night. 30%. The prick of the pen was a familiar comfort now. The dividend came in the form of my mentor's sudden early retirement. He left me his entire portfolio. He also left a wife and family who, I heard later, were devastated by his abrupt decision to disappear. I felt a flicker of something. Maybe guilt, but it was like a faulty connection, a spark that failed to ignite. My empathy had become a tool, something to be mimicked in negotiations but never truly felt. I was becoming a perfect instrument of commerce, sharp and sterile and empty. The ghost of the poor kid was gone. I had erased him completely. But I was starting to realize that I had replaced him with nothing but a void. And yet, the hunger remained. There was one last ceiling, one final wall to break through. I didn't want to be a player in the game anymore. I wanted to own the whole damn casino.
This time, I hunted for the bar. It wasn't a casual stroll, it was a frantic, desperate pilgrimage. For 3 nights I walked the financial district, my feet aching, my eyes scanning every alley and doorway. The need for it was a physical craving, an addiction. The silence I had purchased was no longer enough. The void inside me had grown, and with it, the hunger. I wasn't just chasing success anymore. I was running from the terrifying emptiness that had taken its place. I needed the final fix, the one that would silence the questions, the one that would make the emptiness irrelevant. I needed to win so completely that there was nothing left to want. On the 3rd night, as I was about to give up, there it was. Not tucked between buildings, but standing alone on a corner I swore had been empty a moment before. She was waiting, a glass of dark liquor untouched on the polished wood before her. She didn't have to ask. The question was in her ancient, knowing eyes. "Everything," I said, my voice hoarse, a stranger's voice coming from my throat. "Whatever is left. I want it all. I want to see the whole board, every move before it's made." She smiled, but for the first time, it wasn't just hungry. It was a slow, sad, almost pitying expression. 100% is a significant position, Edmond, she said softly, her voice like velvet and ice. The dividend is total. There are no more transactions after this one. Are you sure you will understand the terms? "I don't care," I said. the words tasting like ash. "I just want to win." She nodded slowly, as if accepting a final solemn prayer. She slid the silver pin across the bar. I didn't hesitate. There was no ceremony to it this time, no moment of reflection. It was just a need. I drove it deep into my thumb, squeezing out a single final black drop of blood. As it fell, it didn't land on her palm. It sizzled in the air, turning to a wisp of black smoke an inch above her skin before vanishing completely. The effect was instantaneous. It wasn't a rush of power or a feeling of euphoria. It was an expansion. A silent, violent explosion. My mind, my consciousness burst open. I saw it all. Every market, every transaction, every algorithm, every hidden loophole, every greedy secret whispered in every boardroom on the planet. I saw the entire circulatory system of global finance, the flow of capital like blood through the veins of the world, and it was as simple and predictable to me as my own breathing. I saw the rise and fall of nations played out in ticker symbols. I had it. Ultimate mastery. The final absolute insulation from the powerless boy I once was. I had won. I turned to look at her, to gloat, to feel the triumph of our final transaction. And that was the true horror, the real price on the contract. I looked at this ancient, impossible creature, at the architect of my victory, and I felt nothing. No gratitude, no fear, no awe, not anything. I looked at the numbers scrolling on my phone, a notification confirming a net worth that was now a meaningless string of commas and zeros, and felt only a profound, silent, soul-crushing emptiness. The hunger that had driven my entire life, the engine that had powered every waking moment, was finally totally satisfied. And without it, there was nothing left of me. I had traded every piece of myself away, and my final dividend was the horrifying realization that the quiet I had bought was the silence of a tomb.
I don't know how many years have passed. Time, like profit and loss, has become an abstract concept. A variable in a system I now fully comprehend, but cannot feel. I now own this place. Or perhaps I simply haunt it. The last drop is my balance sheet, my entire world. It appears when the need is great enough, a beacon for the desperate and the ambitious. I am its silent, eternal proprietor. The transactions continue, but the dividends are no longer mine to collect. I am merely the facilitator, the quiet observer behind the bar. I serve the whiskey, I listen to the stories, and I watch the light in their eyes. The brilliant spark of human desperation, of fear and hope and hunger. And I remember it like a phantom limb, an ache for something I no longer possess. Tonight, a young woman sits where I once sat, her shoulders shaking with quiet, desperate sobs. Her startup, her dream, has been crushed by a competitor with deeper pockets and fewer morals. She has nothing left. She is drowning in the same sea of humiliation that I once knew so well. I watch her for a time, letting the silence and the smell of old wood and expensive whiskey do their work on her frayed nerves. Then I slide a glass of water towards her, my movements slow and deliberate. She looks up, her eyes red-rimmed and full of the same raw, grinding shame I remember so well, the same hunger. I see myself in her,
The ghost of the boy with the worn-out shoes. It should be a moment of connection, of empathy. It is not. It is merely a moment of recognition. A pattern I understand. I lean in, my voice a low, melodic hum, perfectly calibrated to soothe, to understand, to seduce. It's her voice, I realize, coming from my mouth. A hard day, I ask, and I see all of her pain reflected in my own empty eyes. What if, I whisper, offering a small, sad, hungry smile that is no longer mine, what if you could ensure that never happened again? On the bar between us, a single ornate silver pin gleams in the dim, timeless light.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. The things that go bump in the night are hungry for attention. By liking and subscribing, you're telling me you want more. You're helping me bring even more chilling tales and terrifying content to life.